Shivani just came up today to do this with us and talk to us about Tala. And Tala is, if you could give us an intro in kind of layman's language, that would be great.
Sure. So Tala is an Android application that allows anyone across all 5 of our countries. We're currently live in Kenya, Tanzania, Mexico, the Philippines, and India, to instantly get credit scored and actually get access to financial services. Our first product is access to capital, and so anyone in one of those markets can actually get instantly a credit score and actually get access to anywhere between $10 up to about $1,000 in under 2 minutes, right into any account of their choosing.
So you credit score them?
We do. So we actually acquire our customers ourselves. So we use both digital channels, organic channels, and referrals. And then we also, from there, we'll actually score them. So we do all of our own fraud, underwriting, and then also our own servicing as well.
Fantastic. So that's Tala in a nutshell. I want to learn more about your journey. So what got, I know your journey, but I think the audience would love to hear it. What got you started? How did you start with this process and with Tala? Where did the idea come from? And then we can talk about how hard it was.
So my background is a mix of many things. I guess what I would say right out of the beginning is that I never thought I was going to be an entrepreneur, never thought I was going to start a company. Really, I found a problem that I couldn't forget about. And so it actually took on a life of its own and became a company. So the way I found the problem was I worked at the UN Population Fund for about 3.5 years, and while I was there, I worked across 9 different countries in West Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, and India, and I was essentially interviewing customers. So what we were trying to understand was whether microcredit or other development programs were actually helping improve the quality of life of individuals. And so the idea was like, look, tons and tons of capital is going into these programs and into microcredit programs, but we don't actually know dollar for dollar where the money goes and if it actually makes a quantitative impact. And the problem was actually all of this was in cash. And so in order to actually be able to get the input data for our models to do that cost-benefit analysis, I actually ended up interviewing a little over 3,500 individuals across 9 different countries in person. So I became kind of like a walking QuickBooks. But what really happened was I got to really be proximate to the problem and to really understand firsthand all of these enormous financial decisions that people are making every single day. And what I found was, one, that they have a true willingness to actually grow their businesses and improve their quality of life. The other thing I found was that there was an enormous capacity. These businesses had real value. We actually just couldn't see it by only looking at the macro data. And we had to really look at it at that kind of daily life data point. And then the last piece really was that I saw firsthand the perception of risk that these customers faced from the formal marketplace. And I started to realize that if we could actually find a scalable source of data, we could actually figure out a different way to underwrite this consumer. And so by living and working in the market, I saw that a lot of this data was actually sitting right under my nose, right on people's devices. And in many emerging markets, as we know, when banks transact or talk to their customers, they're not doing it in the form of a paper receipt or an email, they're doing it in the form of an SMS. The same thing is with someone buying a bus ticket or a train ticket or anything. The point was actually their daily life data is not sitting in a bureau, it's actually sitting on their mobile phones. So fast forward, came back to the US, couldn't forget about the problem, went back into investment banking, for many reasons we won't get into, but ended up actually learning how to code and developing our prototype. And realizing that, someone had to take the risk, and so I started using my savings to test the algorithm myself. And then eventually, our lead investor ended up finding us, and actually we raised our seed round, and that was in 2013.
And so now how many customers do you have?
We now have, I would say, close to about 3 million borrowers on the platform, and we've had about 7 million individuals sign up and develop a profile with us.
And what's the repayment rate? Because you were talking about risk earlier.
Our repayment rate across our whole portfolio is above 90%.
So, and the average loan size?
So our average term is about 30 days, so it really functions almost as a digital credit card. And the average loan size over that period is about $100.
And have you found that people come back and borrow more and more for different reasons?
Definitely. I mean, about 70% of our customers are actually using the capital as working capital. So it really is that revolving line of capital for their business. Everything from using it for inventory, opening up a new location, going and buying new assets, things like that, opening up a new line of business. But then in addition to that, we also find that these are sole proprietors. And so sometimes, 20% of the time, they will actually use it for bill payments within that business as well, or within their own lives. And then about 10% of the time, we do find it's for emergencies.
Okay, so I'm sure that you've heard in lots of stories about how you've changed people's lives. Could you share one or two with us on how these loans have actually had like an impact on someone, or something that inspires you on the very, very difficult days of being a founder?
Sure. So there's one that I was in the Philippines, and I met one of our customers, and I guess I'll share this story because I think it really resonates with, a lot of the people here who are investors and entrepreneurs themselves. And I think sometimes we take for granted, when you think about a business like ours, I think sometimes we even think, oh, this is the underserved. This is someone who is kind of unlike us, and the decisions they're making are not the same as ours. And so this woman I met, her name was Sophia, and she's in Manila. And she was actually, before, I'll tell you the story, but before she became a customer of ours, she was actually in a marketing position. She had a desk job, but she always had the dream of actually opening up her own ice cream shop. Kind of crazy, but that's what she wanted to do, and she always dreamt of doing that. So she actually used her savings. She ended up actually opening up that shop. And when she found Tala, what she decided was like, hey, my shop is actually running. She understood the things that could actually make her business better. And what she wanted to add to it was actually adding different flavors of icing or frosting to that. So they, in the Philippines, if you've been there, they have very, very sweet desserts. And so she wanted to add different toppings and different flavors like that, and she wanted to make those from scratch. And so what she ended up using her capital from Tala was actually doing just that. She bought that kind of frosting machine to be able to make her own icing, and it's essentially like a mixing machine. And I share that story because I think, when we have new people join our team, I think we have to make them realize that yes, these are small dollar loans, but they're not unlike any of the kind of entrepreneurial decisions that we're making ourselves, right? It's all about actually growing our businesses as well. These are consumers in urban areas, and they're using our product actually in a much more sophisticated way than we actually use capital ourselves, right? When they're getting cash from us in under 2 minutes. Like, I don't even have access to credit like that. And I live in a developed world, right? So I think it's important to remember stories like that because I think it comes back to, the emotion behind money and thinking about it that way.
So an incredibly impactful story in terms of not just who you're affecting and the change in people's lives in emerging markets, but also in the way you've grown the company. So when you first started in 2013, did you think that by January 2019 you would be, how many employees are you now? I don't want to get the number wrong. It keeps changing.
We're now about 380 people.
380 people, 3 million customers or lenders, creditors, and scaling very, very rapidly. One of the most successful fintechs in emerging markets in the world, and impacting people's lives. Is this where you thought you would be in 5.5 years? Or how has that panned out for you?
I don't know. I mean, there are days when I'm kind of like, yes, obviously. I feel like we should have been doing even more because I am impatient to solve this problem. And that is what really drives me. But at the same time, I think maybe as this journey has happened, or continues to happen, I would say I've also, I think, matured in the different levels of impact that I want us to have. So I think there is the aspect of how can we actually impact our customers' lives and improve those lives. But I also now think of it as how do we run this business and this company and actually stand for something that is also bigger than just the mission that we have. So we think a lot about internally, how do we actually, run a company with the values of diversity and equity, and not just actually, bringing in diverse backgrounds, but actually setting up every single person at our company to fulfill their potential. Because I think what's exciting is we've actually seen, our teammates many times go on to actually start, other companies in financial inclusion as well. And I think that's exciting when you can actually not only get people that are super passionate, but then set them up for success so that they're going to go and actually carry this forward. I think the other thing we found is, in our markets, we're actually seeing that other entrepreneurs are now inspired and actually raising capital to actually go start businesses that are also solving this problem. So I think that's a broader ecosystem impact that we're having. And then the last thing I would say is on the policy side, which I thought I would never be excited to work on, we're also starting to have regulators actually coming to us and saying, we want to learn from you guys too.
So on emerging market regulators and raising money for emerging markets, you're based in Los Angeles or Santa Monica now, and working in markets that investors find a little bit more challenging to understand. Has that impacted, do you believe, your ability to fundraise, who you're fundraising from, or do you think that there's appetite for investors out here to fund companies in emerging markets or tackling emerging market problems? How has the education process for the investors and for the regulators impacted your ability to grow?
It's a fun question. I mean, it's varied. I would say, year to year, I can't exactly say, can I predict it and is it getting better? I would say it really depends on the currency markets. I think we can all agree to that. But I think the basis of the idea or the thesis that this customer base is actually, I think, worth serving and that there is a real market opportunity, I think that has been proven. And I think, so we actually do see that more and more investors are willing to take those meetings, are excited about it. And that's almost like that checkbox is done in terms of saying, yes, we agree the market is there. I think where there's still more education to do is around saying, what does the long-term nature of these markets look like? Like, no matter what, we always get the questions of political climate. We always get the questions of, how do you hedge? What do you think about the regulatory market in terms of, will interest rate caps come in? All these kinds of things are always going to be there. And I almost think of it nowadays as it is my job to educate investors, but I almost think of it as if an investor doesn't ask those questions, in a sense, we almost feel like maybe they don't know enough about our markets. And so I actually don't take it anymore as like, oh, I'm going to eye roll at this. I actually think of it almost as a positive, and I think of it as an opportunity to say, okay, like, you're doing your homework, and so we're going to help you do that and prove that we've also done ours.
Fantastic. And in 5 years, what does Tala look like?
What I would say is, I think in 5 years, what I hope is that we have moved beyond just access to credit, and we're really focusing on the entire financial life of a customer, so that they will have access to multiple products through Tala. And then I would say also that I hope that we are in other geographies. And so we're in 5 countries. In 5 years, I hope that we'll be in at least 10 plus countries.
What do you think the hardest part of achieving that's going to be?
I do think it is going to be still around the infrastructure and the regulatory environment in these markets. Because, at the end of the day, if you think about what we've had to do to solve this problem, we're not just solving the access to credit problem. We are having to solve the identity problem. We are solving the payment rails problem. We're solving serving the actual how do we service these loans problem, and then obviously also the capital markets issues. So I would say it's those things in combination.
Thank you. And so for the founders that are here, as you've gone through this journey and between the U.S. and emerging markets, and I think you travel more than I do, which says something. what advice do you have as they scale companies, as they educate investors? And the investor education part is always very important to founders in emerging markets. What advice might you have as they go in that journey? And there's a bunch of fintech investors here, or founders here as well.
I think something that has helped us, this is not as maybe insightful. You guys already probably all know this. I think a big one for us has been around unit economics. And so we do always kind of hone back into that. So especially when you're trying to do the education to investors, I think if you can show them that the business model does work, I think that does show that resilience in your company, right? And I think you actually are able to show in a very simple way that you understand and can control the levers of your business. I don't know. So it's a little bit of a nerdy answer. It's not about resilience and not about those things. I think it all goes back to the fundamentals. And so market by market, that's actually how we show our business is just continuing to get better and accelerating every time we get into a new country.
That's very useful and insightful. I think resilience, et cetera, people hear all the time. And it's very specific, and thank you. So do we have time for questions, or are we done? We're done. Sorry. Thank you so much.